Hey everyone, Leo is here, Jumpstart Lightning. We are back. We're kicking off a new series, Azure IoT Operations. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, Leo is here. Welcome back to Jumpstart Lightning. It's been a while since we were here, but I'm happy that today I have Reddy, my friend, with me to kick off a new series around Azure IoT Operations. Reddy, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Back to be with you on this journey.
Yeah, ready. We've been working on this for a while, but before we're kicking things off and diving into the weeds and starting to nerd out on Azure IoT operations, who you are, what is it that you do?
Hi, everybody. I am Reddy Digampudi. I'm a program manager on the Azure IoT Operations. I lead a few areas such as data processor, deployment, and few other backend services that we have.
Ready. When I joined the group, I didn't know much about Azure IoT operations. Now I feel that I know too much, the reason for that is because of the conversations you and I have been having, the Ignite announcements that we had before the holiday break, and I'm excited to kick off this video series with you. So, really, let's dive deep. Azure IoT operations definitely it's kind of a all new space, right? It's kind of an evolution of that space. So, what is it? What is it all about, Azure IoT operations?
You're absolutely right. This is an exciting time for Azure IoT. We announced Azure IoT operations at Ignite. We did a session together. This is the product that expands on our Azure IoT portfolio. And what we are trying to do is bring a set of capabilities to the edge to put the edge computing in the forefront of that. And Azure IoT Operations essentially is a set of Arc-enabled services that power this platform. And in this one, we help the customer to onboard these assets easily and
Mhm.
get the data from them, democratize the data by cleaning the data on the edge and be able to reason about that and take decisions very easily.
Mhm.
These are all built on the first class Kubernetes enabled
Mhm.
platform.
Yeah.
So
So, Reddy, I wanted to ask you a question before we go deeper here. Would it be fair to say that Azure IoT operations is really a lot of that is got to do with the data pipelines, right? I mean, that's really where a lot of the value proposition comes to place, right?
yeah, in a way, data is the one that is powering the entire need for making
Hmm.
sense out of these assets that are generating so much of data. Comes
Yeah.
in various shapes and sizes, and we help them get the data securely, clean it, and be able to understand all these protocols and massage the data
Hmm.
and make decisions quickly.
All right.
So here we can see a set of services that we are providing.
Hmm.
The Acri enables our customers to easily discover and onboard those assets onto the platform. And we have a OPC broker that lets us connect to these OPC servers and get the data from them in a clean format.
Hmm.
So these two enables easily onboarding and whether it is upscaling or downscaling these assets very quickly. We have a world-class messaging platform on the edge that will enable bidirectional messaging from the edge to the cloud and vice versa. And with the southbound and northbound connectors we have, the data can securely land into this messaging platform. And
Hmm.
then we have a data processor that can be used to normalize these various formats of the data, contextualize it based on other data silos that are available on-prem, and get clean data out. And we have a first-class integration with our data analytics platform in the cloud, which is Microsoft Fabric, which you might have heard of it already.
Hmm.
And then to be able to deploy this in a secure way on-prem in various standards such as ISO 95 to
Hmm.
securely connect these devices to the cloud. And then finally, we got the OT experience that we built, which will help these technicians and several engineers on-prem to model these assets, to model the data pipelines in a very easy to use, no code, low code kind of way. So
Mhm.
collectively, this is Azure IoT Operations.
And Reddy, I had a conversation the other day with someone around the Azure IoT Operations, and the way I like to describe, specifically, I'm picking up on the data processor. The way I like to describe this is, it's like it's an IoT food processor. When you have all these type of data structures and schemas that are coming in, and I know that you're going to show me. I know that you have a demo for me, so it's kind of funny, to see how this correlation come to life. And I really do believe that the data processor piece is really just kind of the heart of all of it, and I'm sure that we're going to see why. But yeah.
Yeah, we do. Actually, I tend to think the MQTT broker as the heart of it, and data processor is trying to make sense out of the data that's coming out of that. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, I don't know who put this architecture diagram, but thanks to that guy.
Yeah. Well,
Leo, thank you so
I'm
much for
I'm
putting
trying.
this
I'm trying.
picture. So here you can see it has a lot of things going on here. In the middle, you can see an Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster. Essentially, by Arc enabling this cluster, we can manage all the life cycle of the cluster and
Hmm.
various components and deployments that we can do. Everything from the same control plane in the cloud, which is ARM, Azure
Yeah.
Resource Manager.
Hmm.
So here on-prem, you can see there are a bunch of assets, and these could be machinery in a factory or in a retail store. You can have cameras and so on and so forth. And there are various OpenCA servers that are distributed among these assets. So
Hmm.
you get the data from the OpenCA server into the broker, and Acri agent will spin up these brokers based on the protocols that they're using.
Hmm.
And the data is now pulled from this OpenCA server by this broker based on the asset model that is defined into the MQTT broker. And this data can be in various formats based on whichever broker is being used. Here we are talking about OpenCA broker, and there could be other custom workloads that are publishing to the
Hmm.
MQTT broker as well. So now the data needs to be normalized and contextualized. That's where you use a data processor to pull contextual data from other sources. You can see a SQL server or any other data source for that fact.
Hmm.
And you combine this data together, and finally you want to publish that out to the cloud or maybe store it locally on-prem and use the connector to publish that to the cloud, like to Fabric or
Yeah.
various destinations.
Yeah.
So finally, the last piece is the our operations experience, which is running in the cloud.
Yeah. So, already one thing that, there's a lot of interesting things here and a lot of moving pieces, obviously, with Azure IoT Operations. But if there's one thing that is very interesting to me is the Arc portion. When we started with Azure Arc, there was no notion of, assets or seeing resources that are not pure infrastructure resources. But now we are getting closer to the point that, you can imagine every every asset that is out there. When we're saying assets, we mean things like cameras, like sensors, like
Exactly.
PLCs, right? And everything is basically a candidate to have a representation in ARM, right? Because of Azure
Yes.
Arc, because of the fact that it sits on an Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster. So that's super interesting, and that's a very, very interesting evolution of Arc as basically as a control plane, as a layer on top of Azure Resource Manager.
Yeah. Essentially, all the resources that are on the edge are represented in the cloud
Yeah,
as ARM resources.
super
Absolutely.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
the Arc enables us to bidirectionally to move
Mhm.
those resources easily or changes applied in the cloud.
So,
Um,
Reddy, shifting gears here, I know that you have a banger demo to show me. So, let's see the magic.
Absolutely. I want to set the context here a little bit. So we have a Redmond site where we are making some widgets, and we have a couple of production lines with various assets. You can see here we have
Yeah.
some boilers, compressors, and so on. So we have a PLC, various PLCs, and these OpenCUA servers that are distributed among this site. I want to
Hmm.
get the data and publish that to the Fabric. but essentially I want to compute operational efficiency of my site and be able to reason about why things are not working.
Mhm.
So let me shift gears a little bit and then show you what we are talking about. I'm going to
I always like when you're showing me this demo. It's always I always learn something like something new every time I see that demo. So
Yeah. So Azure IoT Operations, this is a dedicated OT experience. Usually you go to Azure portal for IT experience.
yeah.
So this is authenticated using our AAD, our Entra ID now.
Mhm.
So when you click Get Started, you will see various clusters that I have access to. I have way too many of them. So you can filter these clusters and say, pick one of the clusters that I have on my laptop right here.
Mhm.
And once you go there, you can see various things. There are a couple of assets there. There are data pipelines and whatnot. Let's go create an asset. An asset here I want to create is an oven, and I'm using a connection profile here, saying this is where the IP address and various connection strings and whatnot for the asset.
Mhm.
And then I want to add a couple of pre-populated couple of tags where I'm getting the temperature and humidity of the oven. And then finally, there are no events in this case. I will review, and you can see there are a bunch of metadata you could add, and finally click create. And we are creating an asset in the cloud, making a call to the ARM control plane, and we
Mhm.
want this asset to show up on the edge through the Arc platform, syncing that asset to the edge, and the data should be flowing. So this is going to take a few seconds for it to sync, and once
Mhm.
it syncs, we will see the data flowing. So let me go back and show an existing asset like a mixer that I've created earlier
Mhm.
about what that would look like. So
Mhm.
here you can see I'm using an MQTT Explorer, and this one is connected to the MQTT broker that is running on the edge, which is this screen. You can see I have a cluster, there are a bunch of pods that are running, and you can see IoT operations. This is just plain vanilla Kubernetes, and you can see Arc related containers also running. So I have created a tunnel to connect to that MQTT broker, and you can see all the messages that are floating. Oh, by the way, our oven got created, and you can see it is
Oh,
sending
that's
data
cool.
to the MQTT. And this is really fast, right? I've created something in the cloud. The definition got transferred onto the edge. It got now it's spun up that broker, and now I'm getting the data published into the MQTT broker.
Very cool.
Now you can see the data is kind of machine understanding way. And I've created a bunch of these things. You can see production line, there's a mixer, there's a robot, and there's second production line, whatnot. So
Mhm.
you can see this data is coming in. It's kind of hard to see. Let me jump over to the screen. This is how it typically looks like, right? Here you can see there is an asset ID, there is humidity, which is here, and there's a machine status, which is over there.
Mhm.
This is literally all the numerical data that my machine is sending. Now
And this is
imagine
basically a
trying,
JSON schema that we're looking at, right? Ready?
this is, yeah, in this case, it is sending JSON data, but
Mhm.
really you want to contextualize this data and clean this data and make it into a way that is easy to query later. So
Mhm.
for that, let me switch gears back, go back to the IoT operations. Now here you can see there are a bunch of data pipelines you can create. Data pipelines are essentially your analysis, data cleaning pipelines that you're creating. And you can create a pipeline, and let me pick one pipeline that I already have. And in this pipeline, I just want to connect to a SQL server and get some contextual data.
Mhm.
And this is a plain simple query where I have
Yeah.
a bunch of assets and their information. You can see that's the asset ID and when it was last serviced, who is the manufacturer, so on. So
Mhm.
it's going to get the data, and I want to store it locally in a cache. And then you can see I can create another pipeline, which is going to get the data from these MQTT topics that we just saw by simply subscribing to anything under Redmond. I want to get all the data from all the mixers, different production lines, and I want to transform the data into a meaningful way. And you can see I wrote it in JQ. It's pretty simple JQ
Mhm.
query. And then enrich the data with the data that I already pulled in from SQL by joining that data source. And you can see I've stored it in sample data set, and then here is a path, here is a join query using a ID match. I'm just saying whenever you see this asset ID, enrich, and then so on and so forth. Right. Finally, I'm writing it back into MQ. Essentially, you can add as many stages as you want. We have a ton of things that we pre-populate with. You can use
Hmm.
it. And then finally, you write it out. In this case, finally, I'm writing it out to Fabric. So you can see that I read it from a topic and finally write it to Fabric. Now, Fabric is a fantastic service which will let you store enormous amount of data and use various data analytical tools to go through
Hmm.
and analyze your data. So in this case, let's go back to our Explorer and see what that looks like. Finally, the clean data is coming here after all that processing that we have done. And you can see that is near real time we are processing the data. So this is the input. The output looks like this. We
Yeah.
have added the customer name with the humidity is clean, machine
Yeah.
status, the compressor, so on and so
And
forth, right?
and Reddy,
Now,
this is what you meant when you said making sense out of that, right? Uh,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And here it is just purely talking about how many good units have produced, how many bad units. But remember, our goal was to compute operational efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
now let's switch gears, go back to Fabric, right? And this is just a Delta Parquet file that Azure IoT Operations can generate based on your schema directly and upload it. And you can
Hmm.
see the data is just in a plain table. And now you can use, for example, in this case, I've used a simple query to go run against a Jupyter notebook here, right? And you can use Python or any SQL, Spark SQL and whatnot.
Hmm.
Or you can use our fantastic Power BI. And I built a little Power BI report where you can see the operational efficiency. These are just basically queries on top of the table and with various dimensions that you can slice and dice. For example, if I want to see, show me only the operational efficiency for Robotech, and you can see the assets and why it is low. Now you can
Yeah.
go debug this and see why it is coming like this. So in essence, we started with creating an asset, getting
Right.
the data, cleaning the data, transforming it, contextualizing, and we sent it to the cloud. In the cloud, we're using big data analytics to
Hmm.
easily analyze the data and make business decisions. This is
So
the crux of IoT
so
operations.
so Reddy, like that I think this is very impressive. The one thing that I always ask you, and I would love for you to share, to share with the audience, is that look, the process, right? When you explain it, like you create the asset, you create the pipeline, you contextualize, you normalize the data, that is all nice. But what about like how do we expect just people to consume this via like APIs or whatnot? Because this is like all of these are basically graphical interfaces that you create. But obviously, people need to automate this stuff and need to do just extra curriculum, extra activities. So, do we
Yeah,
have APIs for all of these?
absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So from ground up, when we build Azure IoT operations, we had few principles, right? Everything should be API driven and everything is based on standards. You saw that we are first
Hmm.
party application that is built on Kubernetes native. MQTT is a standard protocol. We implemented that. All of these services use open telemetry, so you can monitor that
Yeah,
using various tools. Similarly, we use ARM or Azure Resource Manager. You can see
yeah,
this is a cluster that we just saw and bunch of extensions that are
hmm,
deployed. These are Arc extensions. And if
yeah,
I switch over to my resource group, what are all the resources that I have? We just created a while ago our oven, right? Our
yeah.
oven asset, you can see
Look
that's
at that.
actually an ARM object. And we just put in some temperature and humidity. Remember? That's
Yeah,
the ARM object right there. And you could use the UI like what we just created using operations, or you can directly make an API call through ARM,
yeah.
and it all works. So And you can use GitOps to automate all of this creation and management as
Yeah,
well.
the configuration and all that. This is literally the definition of warming up food in the cloud when you have an oven as an as an arm, you know first class citizen asset. That's pretty cool. Reddy, thank you so much for this for this comprehensive demo. Azure IoT Operations, we're going to talk about this a lot throughout this video series, but Azure IoT Operations is really transforming the way we're thinking about things. We're going to talk in future episodes. We're going to talk about the various components that you showed today at a high level as part of Azure IoT Operations, and also connect everything to the story of what is basically adaptive cloud that we started to talk about at Ignite, right? This notion of bringing all of these environments, whether they are hybrid environments, IoT, distributed systems, on premises, multi cloud, and bring all of those together. And I think that, if coming back to this demo, that small piece of showing me an oven or a mixer as an ARM object, that really boils it down. That to me is really where the money shot is, because that's just open a lot of possibilities in terms of how you're thinking about this, and obviously the data pipelines and the contextualization, right, Reddy?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super pumped about the entire thing as a extension of what we already built in IoT portfolio, and this is building on top of all of that and extending it to the edge. We barely scratched the surface of Azure IoT
Exactly.
operations. I'm looking forward to the in-depth going deep into each one of these services, the series as we continue.
Yeah,
And
100%.
thanks very much for having me on your show.
Yeah, 100%. And for the Jumpstart viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. We're excited to come back with the new Jumpstart and new Lightning episode. Stay tuned for the series. Make sure to like, subscribe, and we're going to see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.